The third section of the order concerns what's referred to as the co-location law. It's section 6409A of the Tax Relief Act, and you've heard it a bunch of times, but it states, notwithstanding section 332 or any other provision of law, a state or local government may not deny and shall approve any eligible facility's request for a modification of an existing wireless tower or base station that does not substantially change the physical dimensions of such tower or base station. An eligible facilities request is defined as any request for modification of an existing wireless tower or base station that involves co-location of new transmission equipment, removal of transmission equipment, or replacement of transmission equipment. There are a ton of important words and phrases in that section, and this is the FCC's interpretation of those words. This is the largest, well, it's the most significant section of the order. Whether it's actually larger or not doesn't matter. But it is important and a little bit dense. So what I want to do is I want to start by giving you some of the most important conclusions that come out of this section. The first is that the local agency's permit review process, application and permit review process, if it's covered by section 6409, is not discretionary. So if you go in and you apply for a co-location and your co-location application qualifies under section 6409, you do not need to go through a full discretionary zoning review process or hearing. The process needs to be laid out in specific and objective steps, and you need to be able to simply establish that 6409 applies, and then you get your permit. It's that simple. It eliminates the requirement to prove necessity or make a business case for new installations. How we wish this applied in other areas, but at least finally the FCC has recognized that a local agency's efforts to regulate the growth and construction of wireless networks by forcing us to prove that there's a coverage gap or that there's a business necessity for those installations. At least we finally have the FCC saying in these circumstances you don't have to do that. It does push the envelope on the definition of co-location, so that there are some structures and construction of antennas on some structures that have no antennas that still qualify as co-locations. That's a very narrow area, but at least there is something there. And then finally, given the fact that the language says may not deny and shall approve, it's not completely shocking that the Commission would come up with a deemed granted remedy for failure to comply with the time frame for making a decision under 6409, which they identify as 60 days. So in order for that deemed granted remedy to take effect, the applicant actually has to notify the agency after the time frame has passed that the application is deemed granted, and then either the jurisdiction will accede or will go to court and challenge that. So a number of terms. The term wireless, transmission equipment, existing wireless tower or base station, co-location, eligible facilities request, and substantially change the physical dimension. Those are key terms and phrases in the section that the order defines. Wireless is viewed broadly. It's not limited even to just FCC licensed services. It's any FCC licensed or authorized services. And as that term is defined, it becomes clear that that includes Wi-Fi, which is covered even though it's not licensed. Transmission equipment, again, is defined broadly. Any equipment that facilitates transmission for any communication licensed or authorized wireless communication service. And transmission equipment is defined to include backup power supplies. Existing wireless tower or base station. This may be one of the most controversial sections of the entire order. The term tower is defined as it is in the co-location National Programmatic Agreement as any structure built for the sole or primary purpose of supporting commission licensed or authorized antennas in their facilities. And that's not particularly controversial, but a number of municipal consultants and city attorneys argued vigorously that the term base station really only referred to the supporting equipment, that it wasn't an independent type of antenna installation. The FCC rejected that and defines base station as both the equipment, including antennas, and non-tower supporting structure at a fixed location that enable the transmission of commission licensed or authorized wireless communication services. The difference between a tower and a base station is that a tower has to have been built for the purpose of supporting antennas. A base station does not need to be built for the sole or primary purpose of supporting antennas. So that means that buildings that have antennas on them qualify as base stations even if they weren't built to support antennas. It also means that utility poles are base stations even though they weren't built for the primary purpose of supporting antennas. Now, don't get overly excited about this. You have to remember that this is a co-location act, so that it doesn't make any utility pole or any building, doesn't transform them into a base station. They already have to have an antenna structure or antenna facilities on them. Now, interestingly, the term tower is not defined the same way. It's any structure that's built for the purpose of holding antennas in facilities. And for that reason, the Commission concludes that a tower is a tower for co-location purposes, whether or not there are any facilities on it. But a base station is not a base station unless there are facilities on them. Now, the phrase is existing wireless tower or base station. So the use of the word existing, actually, and this is also significant, the meaning of the word existing differs depending on whether you're talking about a tower or a base station. An existing tower qualifies as an eligible facility under 6409 whether or not it currently supports transmission equipment. The order justifies this position on the ground that the structure was built for the sole or primary purpose of supporting antennas. So whether they're already there or not, it still is a quote-unquote existing tower. It's not the same with base stations. And a base station is not an existing base station unless it already has approved antennas on it.